So, hi, I am delighted to have as a guest today the lovely Jan Trewartha, Director of the British Fascia Symposium and the Fascia Hub. Hello, Jan.
Hi, Joe. Thanks ever so much for having me.
Oh, it's literally
Lovely to see
pleasure.
you.
It's lovely to see you. You're looking very well and very tanned. And those of you that are watching us on YouTube will see that I look like a washed out dish rag and Jan looks delightful, relaxed, sparkly, and that colour, which is that azure blue, one of my favourites, or I think it's cobalt blue maybe, suits you very well. You look very well.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Jan, I wanted to ask you about the British Fascia Symposium. So I thought maybe this would be a great opportunity for you to tell us who the lineup is and just have a chance to let everyone know where it came from. So tell us first what's coming, and then we'll look a little bit, because I love the history. I've known you since the very, very first one. I presented at the very first one.
Right.
I'll always remember that. And well, yeah, go. We'll start off with where we are now, and then we'll go delve a bit into the history.
Okay, so I'm in excitement mode because I get very G's up and excited when these things are coming. So we run it every 2 years, as we always have done, originally in person and now online. And being online, it's, yes, in person is different, but it means that we can reach this huge global community, which is fantastic in the world of fascia. So what we've got is on the 15th and 16th of June, we've got the BFS, the British Fascia Symposium, which this year is going to be a bit different because it's themed. So we've got 4 themes. And the main overarching theme is how is all the new research and information and our new understanding of the body and fascia, which is increasing almost daily. You're reading something exciting more about fascia. How is it informing our practice as therapists and as movement educators? Okay, because we have always been practice-led. We were inspired, our creation was inspired by the Fascia Research Congress, now the International Fascia Research Congress. And when I first went to my first one of that, I thought practice-led, that's what I'd like to do, because I'm a practitioner. We're both practitioners, aren't we, and teachers. So it's practice-led. So what we've got is we're starting off with the first section, which is the new anatomy. So we've got Neil Thies opening with talking of the macro, the micro. I can't even begin to put into words what he talks about, but with his background as a sort of cellular biologist and as a Buddhist, he has the most wonderful way of looking at how we relate to the universe around us. So he is opening with that, and that's a wonderful talk. And then we've got Graham Scarr, who will be talking about biotensegrity, which is an increasingly, obviously, popular and well-known topic now. But what he's looking is actually not the new. He's going back to the 18th century and picking up some understanding and knowledge from then and relating it back to now. So it's a slightly different way of looking at it. And then we have Karen Kirkness, who will be looking at an aspect of spirality. And she is the spiral queen. And she'll be taking us into that world. So that's the new anatomy. And how, understanding all of that, how does that affect us? How does it inform us as people, as therapists, as movement educators? And how does that then inform our practice? Because every time you learn something like that, and every time you pick up even a little bit, that then informs how we work. It informs how we translate what's under our hands to how we work, and then help the person to heal themselves and to set change through their body.
I love it. And we'll go through each section because I'm really excited. I think this is a great way of doing it because, as you know, I'll never forget my very first talk at the British Fascia Symposium, the very first one, and it was on biotensegrity.
Yes.
I was there on behalf of Dr. Levin, Stephen Levin, who coined the term biotensegrity, of course. We're all very grateful to him for that. And I just remember standing there, and I mean, that was 2016, am I right?
2014.
2014, so literally a decade ago, wasn't it?
It's our 10th year. It's our 6th symposium, but our 10th year. Yeah.
Oh, it's just brilliant. And what's so incredible is how it was so completely new then. Nobody'd heard of it. And the onus, oh my God, I remember the sense of responsibility of basically saying out loud to everybody The body is not a stacked compression system. The body is an integrated tension compression system. But more than that, it's a tensegrity system. And what does that mean? And I've been very dedicated to teaching how we historically went from this mechanical metaphor. We've got to be so careful of it because we don't think of it as a metaphor. We don't think of anatomy trains as a metaphor. We think of, oh, this is it. And actually what we did was, centuries ago, we started with bits. We identified bits. And then Tom Myers brought us to bands.
Yes.
But now, which I love that is your emphasis, is how do we work out what's going on as beings in bodies?
Mm-hmm.
And to Neil is the being and the body. He's a liver pathologist. He's just such a wonderful man. Love him to pieces. And his brilliance in his book, Notes on Complexity, in bringing science and spirit together is just, I think we all owe him a debt. And of course, Karen Kirkness, who's Dr. Karen Kirkness now, is one of my dearest friends. And I think she might call herself the chiral queen, because what Karen is so brilliant at is recognizing the mutual spirals, because of course yoga is her background, of what we call in yoga Ida Pingala. And when that balance comes into place, Sushumna arises in yoga. And I think that's the essence of the principles of living tensegrity, is that when tension and compression are in appropriate balance, magic happens, literally.
Yes.
So we are so on the same page with this one. So what's after that? What's the next theme?
Okay. So at the end of every section, we then have a 45-minute discussion panel with the speakers. So you can put questions and they can toss around ideas. Yeah. And then we have a break. And then the second one is working with light touch. You'll see that I've themed it, hopefully in a sensible way. So we work from
everyone's prayer. I hope I did it right, but I haven't got a clue till afterwards. Isn't it amazing? You're going to have 20/20 vision of hindsight at the other end, and you're going to say, "Oh God, I wish I'd done that." But I'm sure it's going to be brilliant just for the intention.
Well, I hope so. I think this is the way it made sense to me to do, because I basically picked. I thought, what is it that our audience are most interested in? And these are the 4 themes. Okay, so there's new anatomy, working with light touch, scars and adhesions, and movement is therapy. So now working with light touch, we've got the amazing Leonid Bloom and Mariana Barreto, who basically translates Leonid. It's really good.
Somebody has to.
Yeah,
I love you, Leonid. I think you're a genius, but somebody has to translate it.
Yes. So they make a very good team like that. And they're looking at some of the research around working with light touch, as well as giving examples of how it can be used. And then we have the brilliant Carol Davis coming on afterwards. And Carol is looking at manual therapy and elongation. I mean, she's a John Barnes method person. Yeah. But people don't really just talk about one modality. They talk about around it and so she's looking at the research, why it works, how it works, and giving examples from her own work. And then this final section of working with light touch, we have this beautiful new person I have met called Maria Jose Sanchez Gomez. I think I've got that right. And now Maria works with horses. And she is giving a couple of case studies working how light touch has worked with horses. I'm really looking forward to this one. And the way she works with them is quite inspirational. And as she says, well, with animals, there's no placebo. They don't know what you're doing. They either let you or they don't.
Yeah.
They either respond or they don't. Like children.
Well, honestly, Jan, I love this because I had the privilege. I had a friend whose mother had horses in the bottom of the garden, in fact. Yeah. And I remember once she said to me, well, you're a body worker, you know about light touch. So will you look at the horse?
Oh,
and, officially I can't in my scope of practice, but a friend of a friend of a friend, hello. And so this poor creature was just in a bit of a pickle. And it was fairly, I say fairly obvious. It wasn't obvious, but obviously I've got a reasonably trained eye. I'm not a specialist in horses, but I could see that something was going on, probably tenderness in one of its hind legs. And it was leaning in with its head down to the trainer. And I said, well, let me see. And, you and I have had this discussion about teaching light touch, and we both taught the same audience. So we'll talk about that in a bit. But I remember just touching this horse really, really gently and thinking, well, if my hands speak fluent fascia, which they do, and many dialects from thousands of patients over many, 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 many years, I wonder if they speak horse. And I thought, well, fascia to fascia, tissue to tissue, if I just love this animal, let's see what spirit does, because I don't think we do this work on our own. But obviously, I would say that. So I touched this animal on its hind leg, and it started to lean into me. And I felt that was a yes.
Mm.
And then we just talked to each other. So I could feel what the good leg could teach the other one. But you know how they lean on one leg? Where, they stand on three and rest the fourth.
Mm.
And I thought, how am I going to get this sweetheart to change its weight, to shift to the other one? So I just thought it, placed my hand on its thigh, and then tapped ever so gently the other leg. And it just lifted, changed weight, and then it went straight into this trainer's shoulder and rested into his shoulder. And this trainer said to me, I don't know what you're doing, but it's working.
Yeah.
And the trainer knew the horse. And I haven't got a way of describing this. And we made a tremendous difference to the animal. It was incredibly rewarding. And I'm not putting myself out there as a horse whisperer for a minute. It was one of those things where knew its trainer, its owner loved me. It was all a team of people. We did it together. But I don't know if you've ever watched the YouTube video, Diabolo Becomes Spirit.
No, I hasn't.
Oh, anybody out there, type into YouTube, Diabolo Becomes Spirit, and watch the story of this brilliant animal communicator, Anna Breitenbach. She is amazing. I know it's got nothing to do with what we're talking about, but it's also got everything to do with what we're talking about, because I think fascia is a communicating system, and we communicate, and we're all trying to become fascia whisperers. And that's actually what you and I are teaching people when we're teaching them our skills. And the Diabolo Becomes Spirit, it says everything. It says everything where this communicator, I won't tell you because I don't want to spoil it. You must watch to the end. It is absolutely incredible. And this is what I think Leonid and Mariana and We Flow Therapy, and they work with children with cerebral palsy, and their work is absolutely beautiful.
It is.
And so Carol David, obviously Carol is a very, very dear friend of mine. So we love Carol. But what I love about Carol particularly is, among many things, her braveness, her courage, her commitment, her languaging, everything. But one of the things that's so brave is that as Emeritus Professor of Physiotherapy, she has embraced a world of a language that doesn't follow what she learned in school. And it doesn't follow what she had to teach. It dares to be different, but she doesn't get people's backs up. She somehow gently introduces this idea, and we've got the privilege. You, me, and Carol are all teaching on John Sharkey's European Neuromuscular Therapy training this year. So what we're seeing is the work we're teaching the students come out in their work under this banner of neuromuscular therapy, which John has pioneered for years. And I can't tell you, it's a privilege, isn't it, when that work comes out? And Carol embraces that. Carol, we all dance together, even though we're not in the same room. It's a privilege, right?
We do. And when I taught that last group, which is the first time I'd taught skull work to the group, I was amazed. It was, not amazed when I realised, of course, that you and Carol and others, of course, and John and everybody had been teaching them for about a year before I got there, or a year and a half. But the way they just picked it up and ran with it and loved it. You usually get maybe a third of the class will do that, and the others take a little longer. Every single one of them. Fantastic.
I know, aren't they fabulous? And I'll tell you something, compliment to you. Working with you meant they had even more confidence, because they all had their certificates of working with scar tissue. They had more confidence in animating the subtle end of the scale even more. Now, John teaches them a very, very subtle, don't get me wrong, osteofascial techniques are just amazing that he's developed. But what it was, this is where I go on about, it's not competitive, it's collective. They are literally walking around with the collective empowerment of this wisdom from you, from John, from Carol, from, yes, I'm privileged to be part of it. And I watched the quality of their work this set compared to the set that I did with them last year before you saw them.
Right.
And they were even more subtle and even finer distinctions.
Lovely.
So,
Thank
I
you.
say a team plus a team
Thank
plus a lot of trust makes triumph. And I think you can pat yourself on the back for that. So
Yeah.
what's the third theme?
Okay, so the third theme, as you know, is
Yes.
scars and adhesions, because you're one of the speakers. So firstly, I think you're opening, aren't you? Yes. You're talking about scar tissue and how it, well, why don't you say what you're talking about? You're talking about scar tissue and how it affects movement.
Yeah, scar tissue and how it affects movement in the sense that I want to make it, I don't believe in dumbing things down, because you've got a very intelligent listening and we're all working with people in various roles as practitioners and very interested practitioners who may not be professional practitioners. So it's not about dumbing it down. And I'm mimicking John Sharkey when I say this, is that we don't dumb it down, but we clarify it in extremely clear baby steps so that people can get from A to Z in progression. So having said that, I love using metaphor because I think that's how we understand things. I think it's essential. And especially since I'm suggesting that the metaphor that we've all inherited of biomechanics, where you break a bit and you just put a mended bit back in, doesn't work.
No.
Because when you put a mended bit back in, you may be able to blend the edges, but you've actually got something that's not part of the original whole.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll be talking about some metaphors for us to help us imagine, but also how to help us access the impact of scarring, because it's not obvious always. And because we're up against, as I've always embraced, I devoted a whole chapter of Yoga, Fascia, Anatomy and Movement to ancient wisdom, new knowledge, and seeing how history gave us this idea that we could go in and make a scar in the body and remove an appendix. Well, thank you, we've saved a life. Or remove something that's dangerous, or get a baby out that otherwise might not be born well and healthy. So all these different scars. And as you've said to me many times, there are very, very few people that haven't got a scar somewhere, and how that impacts our movement. And I want to give people a very clear metaphor for that they can take away with them, because not so they understand, they probably understand already, especially if they've read your book, but so that they can very easily explain it to their clients. Because like you, I'm all about the practice. And when you're in a movement classroom, it's a very different animal to being in a manual therapy classroom where you've got time, or in a manual therapy session, let's say, where you're one-to-one. If you're in a movement class and you've got 12 people, you haven't got time to do a one-to-one assessment of each person. But what you do have to do is see very carefully how scarring might impact their movement and how you can make sure that you're not detrimental in imposing movement on them. So that's going to be kind of my theme. I hope that fits with what you asked me to do.
Absolutely. It's brilliant, because I remember years ago when I started yoga, I had brilliant yoga teachers, but of course we didn't speak the language of fascia.
Yeah.
And I spent decades forcing myself into positions which, because of my own scarring from when I was a child, was actually pushing myself through, trying to push through it. Because when I was a nurse as well, they used to say, right, teach the patients how to knuckle the scars. You see that?
Don't
And that's on your breast cancer scar or your... Exactly. I don't think people are imagining that on their breast cancer scars and cesareans if they've got them, because that is, on your appendix. That is not how we treat the fascia now. So that's where I came from as a nurse.
Yes.
And although I was probably by then a massage therapist, we still didn't speak fascia, which is why I ended up starting the British Fascia Symposium and the Fascia Hub. Now it's a common language, which is brilliant, but it wasn't then. And I remember I used to have such pain after my yoga class, and I thought, well, it must be doing me good.
Oh, for goodness sake.
Well, hopefully we don't think like that, because we're thinking, let's work with the body. My current yoga teacher says, right, well, let's just unspiral the legs the way they want to go. Let's explore where they want to go. Let's breathe into them, and that, of course, I don't get pain anymore. We have moved, and this is what we're bringing with the BSS. We've moved, we've changed. Keep up with it all. This is how we're working now. Yeah.
I love it. So who's next after me?
Okay, so me.
Brilliant. And what are you
So
talking about?
I don't always speak at the BFS. I don't. It took me a long time to actually get myself there, but I am speaking this time, and I'm speaking about the way that emotions are linked into our scars. So we're looking at so Robert Schleip was talking about some really interesting research recently, and he's going to be talking as the third speaker. And I'm going to be taking a bit of that. I'm going to be looking at a couple of real life stories and talking about how scarring affects us on the emotional level and how the body retains that emotional charge and how it can be let go when we work with the scars. So that's my talk. And then Robert Schleip, our brilliant Robert, he's so supportive of the BFS. I think he's been to nearly all of them. You know, he was a keynote with Jan Trewartha at the very beginning. I knew I had to get Jan Trewartha and Robert Schleip to start that. And they both said yes. And they thought it was going to be this small thing, and it was this big thing I put on. And they both said, this is amazing, you know. So we started with a bang. So Robert's back with us, bless him. He's so good. And so he's done some very interesting look at research recently, and he's going to be talking about just some new information, especially around scarring and fibrosis. Really interesting. And he's going to be talking about octopuses or octopi. Octopi.
Of course.
Of course he's going to be talking about
storytellers.
Like talking about octopi. That's that.
Makes perfect sense to me. I love Robert's pieces, and Robert's the reason I got the commission to write Yoga, Fascia, Anatomy and Movement, because he started working with handspring, and that came out in 2015, and then the BFS was 2016. So I was like, can I really do this? And I remember Robert saying to me, if you've written a book about it, you can get on stage and talk about it. So he was, I remember, so supportive. And of course, Leon, who we all miss and treasure. And you know, John always honours Leon every time chance he gets, because they work together a lot. And a lot of Leon's techniques that he brought to neuromuscular therapy, which obviously extends way beyond those techniques. He was a wonderful guide in all this movement. So I'm so thrilled that that's all going to come together. And then what's the completion?
The culmination is movement is therapy. So we're starting with Wojciech Kakowski. He's essentially a physiotherapist, but so much more. From Poland. And he's just a brilliant guy and a heart of gold, such a good nature. And so he is going to be talking about movement, and he will actually be bringing in scarring as well and how that affects it. And he invented something called Zoga. So he's coming from that angle. So he is coming as a movement therapist into that. And then we have Jeannie DeBon and Dr. Tina Wang. And Jeannie, as you know, is expert on EDS and hypermobility. And they are bringing in new research, which is actually created by Tina. And her research, for the first time ever in the world, is being translated into movement practice by Jeannie for the Symposium. So this is really new research put into practice and translated. And Tina's absolutely thrilled, and Jeannie's excited. So we're looking forward to that. And then to finish, we just got somebody really low energy. Oh, no, we haven't. We've got Paul Thornley.
I was just going to say, hang on a second. Low energy, Paul Thornley. He's like a pocket rocket. I mean, it's not pocket either. It's a big rocket. Paul is just amazing. He's so dynamic. What a fabulous finish.
Well, I thought it would be a great thing, great to end with Paul, because he's just so full of energy and passion. And he's taking us into the world of micro movement. So this is the new understanding of how refined and appropriate and specific movements can take us to a different level in integrating the body. You will know much more about it than me, I know, because you two teach myofascial magic in action. So you can expand on that if you want to.
Well, it's the second book that I've written. I was commissioned to do a series from Yoga, Fascia, Anatomy and Movement, but translated into practice. So we're on the same page, Jan, all the way. It's how can we put this into practice and make it real? And of course, Paul, he's been a martial artist since he was 7. He's triple black belt in karate. He now does Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And of course, Pilates. He's one of the world's top Pilates instructor trainers. And of course, he was getting heartbroken when he saw scar tissue being ignored and misunderstood. He saw what he calls cut and paste repertoires being applied. And he worked for many years seeking to change the curriculum. And he invited one of the biggest Pilates groups in the world to change their curriculum and John did a paper based on it, and he used all the research. We helped him research, but they wanted to stick with the standard repertoire. So he was a little bit kind of lost as to where to get traction. And I said to him, well, I'm just doing the next book, and I really want to do a practice that isn't based in yoga, but that can be applied for any practitioner.
Yeah.
And I said, would you help me? I was tired by then. I'd done a lot of work. And Paul said, yeah, when should we meet? And we said, let's get together on Sunday on Zoom. Obviously, he's in Dubai. And we were booked for a call at 6:00, and I had my computer all ready, and there was a knock at the door, and I thought, oh my God, now what? So I ran to the door, and this is a Sunday night at 6:00, and I opened the door, and he's standing on the doorstep with a suitcase. And I said, what are you doing here? And he said, well, we're booked for 6:00, aren't we? And I said, but you're in Dubai. And he said, no, I'm here. Let's do this. But I was completely stunned. But he said, I thought the studio was booked for this week. And I said, it is. And he said, well, hello. So I became the model, and we just worked together. And I can't tell you, he's an exceptional human being. He's so dedicated, and he just wants to make a difference in the world, but a real difference. So he's a very, very skilled manual therapist and movement teacher. So what a finale.
Yes.
I'm not just saying low energy. Really?
Well, I figured that I want to do movement is therapy, but then if we're talking about movement, my own personal passion working with scars, how can we talk about that if we haven't looked at how scars affect movement and emotions affect movement? So scars and adhesions before that. And then how can we talk about working with scars and adhesions if we haven't looked at working with light touch? Because we don't knuckle the scar down anymore. And then how can we talk about working with light touch if we haven't looked at the new way that we look at the anatomy? So that's how it happened.
I think however you reverse engineer
logical, really.
Yeah, it's a beautiful logic. And I also love the idea that you're addressing EDS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and hypermobility for several reasons, Jan. One is being hypermobile myself. I had to find out why some of the generalized principles on stretching in yoga are wrong.
Yeah.
They're just wrong. And it was like I was a lone voice out there saying no. And how did I find out? Because I thought I was really good at yoga, only I found out it wasn't that I was really good at yoga. It's because I'm super, super bendy.
Yes.
And it was a real problem for me learning structural work with bendy fingers that fold in all directions, because I had to learn to stiffen them suitably to do the work and not hurt myself.
Yes.
Great, big, huge. And so I have huge admiration for somebody who's not only scientifically done the research to find out what's really going on, but gone to the trouble of working with somebody else who's taken the trouble to translate it into practice and give us those nuggets that we all need. Because here's the thing, this is what I wanted to talk to you about as well. All of these people, everybody that you've mentioned, is in the healing arts. And the beauty of being in the healing arts is that we can all work in different mediums.
Yeah.
You're not more of an artist because you do watercolor than an artist who works in oil paint. And they're no worse or better for the medium that they're in.
Yeah.
It's unique to the subject. It's unique to the moment. It's unique to the environment. It's unique to what's available.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so what I think you've done that's so brilliant is brought together all these different people working. I'm not calling us healers because I think we're facilitators, but we are working with the healing arts, and we are all artists, and we are sharing our artistry, not as the way, but as a way that works. And we're encouraging everyone coming to the British Fascia Symposium or any other symposium to learn and fill their palette with new colours, different media that they can work in, and different types of paper. And, even if you're a doodler, you can still have something to contribute to the healing arts of being a member of a family. And I think that's what you're doing. And what it was that I wanted to say to you was, because I think we're all healing artists in the sense that most people simply want to be heard. And fascia for me is a tissue of, I'm going to sound like the hairy fairy reverend that I am, John's word, love, light and sound. Because for me, fascia wants to do the most loving thing for the body that it can. It's just that we don't speak its language. So it screams at us when we're not listening, and it's called pain. It transmits sound and it emits light.
It
So
does.
for me, it's a tissue of love, light, and sound. And the more we can get into that, and I don't say that lightly, I say that after many hundreds of hours in the anatomy lab,
Yes.
many hundreds of hours in conferences, many hundreds of hours writing, researching, and whatever. And, we've known each other for over a decade now. And I think there is a level of healing that comes just from listening to each other.
Yeah.
And that's what I know you teach when you're talking about working with a client. You are listening, and what you do when you do your beautiful scar tissue techniques and your scar work, it's a very profound and informed listening technique, right?
Yes, it is.
And so I think that is what you've brought to the table in terms of a conference. And I remember the first one, everyone with coats, with their shirts on, with host written on the back. And
we had our hosting team, yeah.
And you had a hosting team, so nobody was on their own.
Exactly.
And I just want to acknowledge you for that publicly. And I want to say thank you for what it's taken from you personally, because I've witnessed some of it. And I know that there was a time back then, Jan, it's still true now, but it was even more true then, and I'm right with you on this, when people would look at you as if to say, well, who are you? What's your qualification? Are you a doctor of blah, blah, blah? I knew Robert Schleip before he was Dr. Robert Schleip, and now he's Professor Robert Schleip. And Karen was my mate when Spiral Bound came out. We worked on that together, and I love Karen to pieces. And she was doing her doctorate while I was doing mine, and I'm still the same person. And I have to tell you, when I got home, I'll never forget this as long as I live. I was standing there thinking, what do I do? And do I put my title in front of my name? What do I do? And I got home, and my son goes, Mom. And I thought, stay awake, Jojo. You're still just mum.
Yeah.
That's what you are. And you have been kind of, I'm going to say this in the most profound compliment that I can. You've held a mothering grace, a maternal grace. It's maternal because it's so caring, it's so nurturing, it's so typical. I'm not saying men can't be nurturing. I am absolutely not saying that. This is not a sexist statement. I don't do all that. We all have, if you wish to call it, the maternal, paternal abilities to be both, neither, either, or. I'm embracing all of that. Whatever that is for you. What you've done is you've brought a maternal grace to the scientific exploration of making fascia real in practice for movement and manual therapists. I commend you for it. I acknowledge you for it, and I love you for it. And thank you. Thank you, because it's a thing, Jan. It's a big thing.
Thank you, Jo. Well, the joy of it for me is that from that venturing forth, thinking, I don't know that much about fascia. I think we need a conference. I think people need to know how it informs their practice, and starting it, and with a really nice team around me at the time. And without them, I don't think I'd have managed to do it, because I didn't really know I certainly didn't know what I know now. I was new to the field, So there was Julian Baker, Ruth Duncan, and Michelle Watson. I think were the only three. I think so, yeah. And they were brilliant, and they helped me through that first couple of symposiums, yes. And then, of course, the fourth one, we had to go online. But I wasn't.
Who's been on your team since then, Jan?
Well, I don't really have a team. Last year we did have, we had a team which varied, but this year I decided to run it differently. So I've basically worked it all out how I wanted it doing myself, and I feel okay to do that. But I am so grateful to all the people on whose shoulders I have trodden over the years, and quite heavily sometimes. And of course, through meeting you guys, you, Leonid, Graham Scarr, and John Sharkey, that's how my book came out, because I couldn't write a book on biotensegrity. I wrote a book on scarring and biotensegrity, and you did the biotensegrity bit, and I did the scarring bit. So, there's always something nice comes from it,
Absolutely. And as you said as well, people like Robert Schleip's support and John. I mean, John will support just by writing a paper somewhere in the background and making sure it's out there to support what it is that we're all saying. He's out there. I actually don't know anybody more dedicated to making a difference that we can all use as a legacy in the future so that we can lean on. And I think that's what you're doing by bringing people like Neil, like Robert, whoever anyone is in the field, known or unknown, that they're all being brought together to weave together as a true collective, a true collaborative.
Yes.
Because we're all the same. We're all in the healing arts seeking to make a difference to our clients, right? Same goal.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what we do. C'est la raison d'être. So why not immerse yourself in something that's going to make your world more interesting as well? I mean, how many just massages do you want to do? I know, I was a massage therapist for years. It was okay, but we didn't have the training that we had now, all these add-ons and CPDs, we didn't have that there. And I was so excited when I found something new that actually meant that I didn't have to massage that same knot every month. I could get rid of it. Yay! And it was positional release, which is what Leon Chateau used to teach. But I didn't learn from him. I learned via the orthobionomy way and came in that way, and it transformed my practice. That understanding transformed my practice. Didn't know we were working on fascia. Not then. Long time ago. So why not just absorb what's happening and understand that small investment of your time is going to reap dividends, because as that percolates through your understanding of everything we're going to be teaching, as that percolates through your understanding, and as you meet people, we're running it on the Hover app, so it's an interactive, you can, like somebody could text you and say, oh, can you just explain that bit that you said, Joe or Jan or Robert, would you mind, I was sharing this resource or whatever. You can do all that on the app. So as you're meeting people who are from the world of fascia and communicating with people, maybe having a little breakout here or breakout there, that is going to expand your world. It's going to expand your understanding of the body, of fascia, and of yourself and your potential and what you can do with these. This is all you need, your biofeedback systems.
Jan is holding her hands in the air for those of you that can't see us. So, Jan, I know it mattered to you a great deal that everybody felt welcome, that they were hosted, they were looked after in the in-person events.
Yes.
And I was super thrilled to be doing an in-person event with you last year.
It was earlier this year.
It was earlier this year, wasn't it? My brain. That was so fabulous. And we were able to really bring people together. We took a choice to remove screens, to not do a slideshow, to keep out the tech, and to come in person and breathe, move, feel. That was the thing, wasn't it? And I think we made the right choice. I'm sure there's always one or two that wanted more technical information and a slideshow, but I felt the vast majority loved the fact that they didn't. But working the other way, of course, we're all pretty much obliged to either talk to camera or do a slideshow of some sort, because we are limited to online, but that's what makes it available. So we deal with that. Do you think using this app in this particular way, or this platform, is how you make up for that hospitality, that maternal grace that you bring to the occasion? Because I know it's very important to you.
It is. And don't get me wrong, Zoom's amazing. Zoom is amazing. I think the difference with Hover, well, I know the difference with Hover. We used it last time. That's why we're using it again. Is, for example, Carol Davis met Jeremy Ryan Mossman there. Jeremy Ryan Mossman is a singing teacher, absolutely dedicated to working around the voice. And he and Carol Davis got together and did a little breakout room, and we recorded it. And it was a special little section just discussing releasing the voice, basically opening the voice. So that came from that. And then other people just took little like, let's have coffee. Joe, I haven't seen you for ages. Let's have a coffee and chat. And also you can share research and resources on the community notice board. And all the people attendees are listed. So you can search for somebody and then contact them, have a coffee with them, message them, whatever you want to do. So I suppose what I think we've succeeded in doing, because it had a good feedback last time, is that on a very easy to use app, and believe it when I say it, because I am not technical. I have a technical team. If I say it's an easy to use app, it's a jam-proof app. Just because I do all this stuff, don't think I do it myself.
I know where you're coming from. I just presented at a marketing conference, and I literally was the oldest person there with 500-600 people there. And I was literally the oldest person there. And there was a person on stage before me who was saying, does anyone here remember a time before social media? You see, and then I got on stage and I said, my darlings, I remember a time before coloured televisions.
Yes, black and white TV.
Seriously, I remember when the first colour television came into our house, and I remember when the first calculator came in, and my father said, how are children going to learn mathematics with a calculator?
Yes.
I mean, it's another world.
It is another world. So anyway, this app is really easy to use, and we've got our tech support in the background if you need support. And I find it's the best way that we found so far of creating I know it's an illusion, but the sense of three-dimensionality in this 2D online world.
Yeah.
And people have met interesting people that way. I've been told afterwards. Yeah. So there's this opportunity to network. And then what we're doing also on the 22nd of June, because I thought, I want a bit more discussion sessions. We have Lisa Babiuk and Elizabeth Dare Andes, who are absolutely brilliant movement teachers and obviously immersed in the world of fascia and energy. And they are going to be holding a discussion session on the Saturday, the 22nd, but it's only open to people who've got tickets. It's ticket holders. It's a bonus. Okay, so you can go and join them. And then the next one is we have Embodied Biointegrity, which is Chris Clancy and Gwen Cornish are hosting a discussion on biointegrity. And I think they have Leonida Mariano there, Graham Scarr, Susan Lowell Solzano. Yeah, so there's going to be a discussion with people who are passionate about biointegrity. So that's, again, available for the attendees. So what I've tried to do is a bit of everything for everybody. There's all sorts of interesting stuff. There's places you can go and ask questions afterwards. You can engage on the app. And all our amazing speakers, including yourself.
Oh, bless. I'm going to complete this podcast with something that I think it's quite moving, and I'd love to share it if you'll indulge me. I know it's my podcast, but that's not the point. I was at this presentation thing, this big conference on the weekend, and I met a lady at the bus stop, and I was waiting for the bus outside my Airbnb, and she was in the Airbnb next door, and she came out as the 18 bus disappeared off up the hill, and she looked at me. Lovely woman from Nigeria, and she's just fabulous turban on her head. And she looked at me and she said, "Was that my bus?" And I said, "I don't know." It was the 18. And she looked at me as if to say, "Well, why didn't you put your hand out and stop it for me?" And I was like, "I didn't know it was your bus." And she just burst out laughing. And then a half-sized bus came along, and she put her arm out, and actually it wasn't in service, but she thought it was mine. And it was so funny. We just started giggling at this nonsense, like we'd never met in our lives, but now we know each other. And then a bus came up and parked at the bus stop, spewing out fumes because it was broken down. And I just said, "Shall we walk?" And she said, "Yes, honey, let's." So we started walking. I didn't have a clue where I was going. Excuse me. And she helped me. She sort of said, "Where are you going? Where are you ending up?" "Oh, I'll show you where to go." And where we took. And I said, "Are you a carer?" And she said, "Yes. How did you know?" And I said, "I recognize the uniform, and my mother's in a care home, and I just want to say thank you."
Yeah.
She said, "Why?" And I said, "Because I watch what it takes."
Yeah.
I watch what it takes. And my mother is surrounded by people who are now suffering with dementia. And my mother doesn't have dementia, but it's very difficult for her because she's not trained as a carer. So she's just surrounded by something she doesn't really understand. And she wants to help people, but she doesn't understand how to. Anyway, this lovely woman looked at me and she said, "You just have to listen." And I said, "Sorry, in what context?" And she said, "As a carer to people with dementia, if they knew what they were doing when they're at their worst, they wouldn't do it. Mm-hmm. You just have to listen and witness them."
Yeah.
And I just stood there and I thought, oh my goodness, heaven is a place on earth. Mm-hmm. Hell is not knowing it. She was right there. and we shared names and we chatted, and she just said, "It was so lovely to meet you." And I said, "It's so lovely to meet you." We're giving each other a great big hug and a kiss in the middle of the street, Wembley High Street.
Yeah.
And then I walked off to my conference and I thought, all this stuff at this conference and the gold was at the bus stop.
Yes. Yes.
And send and witness. Isn't that what we teach?
Yes, it is.
And isn't that what we practice? And isn't that what we love?
Yes.
And I don't know how you've done it, but I actually think you've managed to bring that into a symposium and a hub.
Yeah.
I bow to you. Big respect, big love, and big thank you.
Thank you, Jo, and for all your support over these years, and for loving my babies.
What do you mean?
They're my babies. The VFS and the Fascia Hub are my babies. Them was my maternal grace. But within that is all the therapists who, like me, when I started, don't know much or want to get better, or sense there's something more that they don't know yet, and they think there must be something else, and you do course after course after course after course, but in the end, as you say, the nugget is at the bus stop. So I hope we're going to drop some nuggets for you.
I hope so. And it's brilliant that you say that, because I say to those people, you intuitively know when you've got the nugget you need, which means you actually already knew, and some part of you knows that you haven't heard it yet.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly.
My dream is to drop all those nuggets in. Hopefully people will find them.
Thank you, and much love.
It's lovely to talk to you.
And you.
Yeah.
Bye, Jan.
Bye. Bye, everybody.